Hello aspirants. Today in Agram IAS, we are starting a new initiative, the Hindu Daily News Analysis. Myself, Balachandra DC, I teach current affairs and international relations in Chennai. So coming to current affairs, as you all know how important is current affairs for this examination. I always say that somebody who is good in current affairs preparation, their 50% of their total preparation is taken care of. So that much is the importance of current affairs for both prelims as well as mains and your personality test also. So when we talk about current affairs, the most important aspect is reading newspaper, and most of the aspirants follow the Hindu. So that's why we are starting this new initiative, the Hindu Daily News Analysis. And here, our major focus will be on prelims preparation. So what are the takeaways from the Hindu on a daily basis with respect to prelims preparation? About myself, I was an aspirant like you all before. I um, I wrote 8 mains starting from consecutively 8 mains starting from 2012 to 19, and after that I'm into teaching civil service aspirants. So, and for my consecutive success in prelims, what helped me was obviously you need a very good preparation in your static areas, but apart from that, what helped me was I was regular with the newspaper. So most of the times I used to follow religiously the newspaper on a daily basis. So that helped me a lot. It's not only about current affairs, because in the upcoming discussions you will see that when you read newspaper, there are a lot of static things that are also into that, especially subjects like polity, economy. When we discuss some topics, you will see that there are a lot of static subjects that are also covered in that. So it will be like a good revision for your static also. And the most important aspect is how you interlink the static part and current affairs. So in our discussion, those are the focus areas, especially the prelims perspective, what are the important takeaways, and how we'll interlink the current affairs with the static part so that you will develop a broader perspective. So you can make, and another questions related to newspaper reading, many aspirants ask is whether we should take notes, but I would say rather not, because nowadays you have a number of magazines. So just develop a habit of reading newspaper every day, spend not more than 1 hour, and every day I'm posting important topics, because many aspirants, especially the freshers, they have this problem of identifying or picking up the important topics for our exam. So I post that in our channel also. What are the important news that you need to pick up and you need to read? Just give a read of these news items, and end of the day, we'll be making this daily news analysis. We'll be discussing those important topics and how these topics, from these topics, what we can look for our prelims exam, and all those things will be discussed. So today we have a good number of topics. So to start with the important topics today, so what are the topics that we are going to discuss in this session? So today newspaper, if you see, the headlines, the last phase of Lok Sabha elections. Today was the last phase of Lok Sabha elections, so we'll be discussing about that. Then heat wave in several parts of the country. You know, in the past few months, we are seeing that in many parts of the country. And today newspaper, it talks about many people lost their lives because of heat wave. So we'll be focusing on what is this heat wave. And coming to the economy part of uh, the newspaper, we see that there was data about India's GDP growth for the financial year 24, and then there was data about core sector growth for the month of April, and then there was news about fiscal deficit for the year of 24. And then coming to the international relations part, we have some important topics related to Russia-Ukraine war and Israel attacks on Gaza Strip, the Rafah crossing, and then finally we'll be discussing about the elections in South Africa, some few important points related to the elections in South Africa. So this is what we are going to discuss today. So to start with, so the first the headlines today, that is the marathon polling season ends today in final phase. So in this news, what are the takeaways for us? Only few things. So today is the last phase, the seventh phase of the Lok Sabha elections, and around 57 Lok Sabha seats went to polls today. And the most important constituency, the Prime Minister's constituency, Varanasi, also went to polls today. And then in this uh, news item, what are the important takeaways for us is that the low voter turnouts in this election, that is one aspect that we need to remember. The low voter turnouts compared to 2019 elections. So on average, in the first 6 phases of this election, what we saw was around 65 on average, 65, 66%, which was much lower compared to the previous election. So these are the only takeaways from this topic. Otherwise, it's more of political. So for us, what is more important in the exam perspective, especially the prelims perspective, those areas we'll discuss. So we'll move on to the next topics. I'd be discussing about, or I'd be talking about what are the areas that you need to note it down or make note of it. So that will be useful for your exam. Only those points, if you note it down, that will be sufficient. So the next topic is about heat waves. Heat wave claimed 61 lives, and it includes polling officials also in various parts of the country. And we see that in the last few days in the newspaper, we read about temperatures soaring up to like 47, 48, 49 degrees Celsius in many parts of northern India. So, so what are the takeaways for us here? What we need to focus is what are these heat waves? So for us, the most important aspect is we should know what are heat waves, because this year it was very much in the news. So we can expect questions related to heat waves in prelims, right? So what are these heat waves? These are the proper definition for heat waves. These are prolonged periods of excessive hot weather, right, and which has adverse impacts on human beings, the environment, and even the economy also, because it reduces the productivity of workers and all that, right? So why it is important? We see that in the recent years there is increasing number of heat waves. The frequency and the intensity of heat waves are increasing in the recent years. Yes, mainly due to climate change. That's why it is very important to know about heat waves. And why India is more vulnerable to heat waves, because being a tropical country, India is more vulnerable to heat waves, right? So now we should be very clear about what is the Indian Meteorological Department's criteria for declaring heat wave in India. That is very important for us, especially in the exam perspective. So IMD says that heat wave will be declared when the maximum temperature of a place, if it is if it is more than 40 degrees Celsius for plains and 30 degrees Celsius or more for hilly regions. So this is very important. Please make a note of these aspects, the IMD criteria for heat waves. So 40 degrees Celsius or more for plains, 30 degrees Celsius or more for hilly regions, then IMD will declare heat wave situation. So there are some other technical aspects that are related to heat waves, and there are two aspects. Okay, temperature, when the present temperature, what is the departure of the present temperature from the normal conditions? Okay, for example, for a heat wave, whenever there is the departure is more than 4.55 degrees Celsius, then heat wave will be declared. So let's take the normal average temperature, the normal temperature, for example, in Chennai, in the month of May, let's take if it is around 40 degrees Celsius. If it is more than that, if it is 45 or 46 degrees Celsius, then that will be declared as a heat wave condition. Then we have severe heat wave when this departure from normal is more than 6.4 degree Celsius, right? See, if your place normal temperature is 35 degrees Celsius, and if the present temperature is 43, 44 degrees Celsius, then that will be declared as a severe heat wave condition. So that we should know. And it can be declared based on actual maximum temperature also. When the maximum temperature reaches something like more than 45 degrees Celsius, heat wave, and more than 47 degrees Celsius will be declared as severe heat wave. So what we So in this news is that in the last few days, what we are seeing is that in many parts of the country, especially in northern India, the maximum temperature was more than 45, 47 degrees Celsius, right? So that's why it is very important for us. So these are very important for us in the exam perspective. Then coming to the next topic, that is about manufacturing sector's growth and how it lifted India's GDP growth to 8.2 degree, sorry, 8.2 percentage, right? India's GDP growth is 8.2% in financial year 24, and this data is released by NSO. That's what we are going to discuss. So what are the takeaways for us here? So India's real GDP for financial year 24, financial year 24 is nothing but 23 from April 23 to March 24. So India's GDP has grown by 8.2%. Earlier the forecast were talking about around 7%, 7.3%, but now they revised it, and now the NSO says that our GDP numbers are 8.2%. We have grown at a pace of 8.2%. And last year, our GDP growth was 7%. So you can see there was a considerable improvement in the GDP growth rate. And this data is very important, and you can note it down because this you can use it for your mains answer writing also. These points you can write. And if you see the nominal, this is real GDP. So here the takeaway is India's real GDP grown by 8.2%, nominal GDP grown by 9.6%. So as we know that what is the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP? When you remove inflation from nominal GDP, you will get the real GDP. So what we focus more on is the real GDP. We want to remove the inflationary effects. So real GDP is very important, where we have grown at 8.2%. Right? And India is one of the not one of the India is the fastest growing major economy in the world, and already we are the fifth largest economy in the world. And in the next few years, maybe by 2027, we'll be getting into the fourth place, and very soon before 2030 we'll become the third largest economy, next only to the US and China, right? So you can see the graph here. So it shows India's GDP growth rate in the past decade. So we see that in 2020, because of the COVID pandemic, the lockdown and all that, the GDP growth rate was negative. It went to minus 5.8, and after that we recovered significantly, and today we are at 8.2. So the takeaway point is GDP growth rate for the last financial year, that means the last year, 23 to 24, that is 8.2%, and the previous year our GDP growth rate was 7%. So and so we have sectors, different sectors of the economy, right? We have agriculture, we have manufacturing, and we have services sector. So what is the contribution to this GDP growth? So what we say is manufacturing sectors has contributed more for this, or significantly to this GDP growth. Manufacturing sector has grown at around 9.9%. So manufacturing sector's growth has contributed significantly for overall India's GDP growth. If you take agriculture, what about agriculture? Agriculture growth rate was muted, or it was stagnant, you can say around 4.5%, not more than that for the past few years. And what about the services sector? The services sector is growing at a rapid pace, and it is there was robust growth in the service sector, which will be around somewhere around 9%, 9-10%, which was always there for the past few years. But what is more significant is the contribution of manufacturing sector, which have increased significantly. That's where we see India's GDP growth moving forward to 8.2%. So here you can see in the last decade, what is India's GDP growth rate? We talked about this, minus 5.8 in financial year 21. But on average, if you see in the past decade, our GDP growth rate was averaging around, if you see the pre-pandemic years, it was average, on average, we had grown at 7% minimum. So, and now we are back into that, an average 7 to 8%. So we are growing after the pandemic now. So we are catching up with our pre-pandemic growth levels. So that is very important. See, this graph is very important. What is the takeaway here is, you may get question in prelims, like we see that in the recent times they ask questions like, India's GDP, they give statements like India's GDP has consistently grown in the past 10 years. This will be a statement. But if you see this graph, this is a wrong statement because because of the year financial year 21, where there was negative growth rate, right, of minus 5.8. So there is no consistent growth rate. There was a negative growth rate. So you have to be careful about these statements, and you should focus on these important indicators, especially GDP growth rate and fiscal deficit. We are going to discuss fiscal deficit after this. Then current account deficit, like that, only most important indicators. Don't overburden yourself with all the indicators, which is not necessary. Only focus on very important indicators. So this is about the GDP growth rate, which was released by the National Statistic Office. So now in prelims perspective, so we should immediately recollect about something about National Statistic Office, right? So it comes under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and it is the nodal agency for development of statistics sector in India, right? So there is a lot of data collection involved. So you know all these data, GDP data, GNP data, fiscal deficit data, current account deficit data, all this data, there is a lot of data collection involved, and NSO set the standards for the data collection and the development of the overall statistics sector in India. So if we see NSO, it consists of Central Statistics Office and National Sample Survey Office. Again, this is important. A few years back, these two organizations were two different organizations, but now they were brought under one umbrella organization, that is NSO. So the NSO consists of CSO and NSSO. This we need to know especially. And what are the important functions of NSO? It compiles and releases the index of industrial production data on a monthly basis, which is again very important. Index of industrial production, we are going to discuss about that also. And it does annual survey of industries also, and overall organized manufacturing sector, the data about organized manufacturing sector, that is also collected and released by NSO. The most important aspect is it releases IIP and the GDP figures and all that. So that is about National Statistical Office. So the next topic, April core sector output rises 6.2%. So here this is about the core sector, right? The core sector of our industrial production, and this is only a monthly data. This is only about April. What we discussed in the previous topic, that is the annual data for the last financial year 24. India's GDP grown by 8.2%, which is very important. This number is not important because it is only about April, in the month of April, how much. So here our focus will be not on the numbers, but about what is this core sector and what are the industries that are part of the core sector. So that is very important takeaway for us, right? So here, if you see, in April the core sector growth was 6.2%. That is fine, and the point is all the sectors that are part of the core sector that has grown in a positive way, except fertilizers. So we'll see what are the different industries part of core sector. So there are 8 core industries. When we talk about core sector, it has 8 industries part of it, and this weightage is not that important, but what is more important is what are these 8 core industries that you should know. Because whenever we calculate index of industrial production, whenever NSO releases this index of industrial production, these 8 core industries, they have a weightage of 40% in index of industrial production. So when we say total industries, in that only these 8 industries contribute 40%, right? So that's why they are called core industries. And if you see what are these industries, they are very much important for the growth and development of the economy also. So that's why we call them as core industries. So what are these? Coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products. These are the 4 important core industries. If you see these 4, these are all related to the energy sector. The broader sector here is energy. As you know, any economy to grow, you need energy resources, and these are the energy resources. So coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, And then what are the important aspects that are needed for the growth and development of an economy, especially for industrial production? So what are the other aspects needed? So steel and cement, very important for industrial production. Then we have fertilizers, because India is basically an agrarian economy. Indian economy is primarily dependent on agriculture. More than 50% of the population dependent on agriculture. So fertilizers are very important part of the industries. Then we have electricity, which is very important for any economy to grow. So whether it is industries, whether it is agriculture, whether it is services sector, you all need electricity. So that's why these 8 are considered as core industries, which have a total weightage of 40% in the overall index of industrial production. So what is index of industrial production? So this IIP measures the changes in the volume of production of industrial products, the overall industrial production in the country, that is measured by IIP, and it is compiled and published monthly, on a monthly basis, by NSO, National Statistical Office. And what are the 3 major components of this IIP? If you see the various industries which are there in India, they are classified in 3 broad categories: manufacturing, mining, and electricity, right? And whatever 8 core industries we discussed, that are all part of this IIP, and these 8 industries put together form 40% of this IIP. So when we divide these 3 major components, manufacturing has the greater weightage out of all other aspects. So we could see that in the graph here, that around 78% of total industrial production that comes from manufacturing, that is categorized as manufacturing industries. Then second, mining industries, it's around 15%. Then remaining 8% is the industries that are related to electricity production. So this major components you should know. What are the 8 core industries you should be clear about, right? And as I told you, the monthly data and all, we are not bothered about. We are not much worried about what is the numbers, like in April how much we grown. So that is not required. But the annual data will be helpful. So annual GDP data was useful. But here the major focus is we should know what are core industries and what is index of industrial production. So we'll move on to the next topic today, that is fiscal deficit. In financial year 24, it reduced to 5.6% of GDP. So again, which is very important. So GDP, so these are all good signs. It shows that the macroeconomic, there is macroeconomic stability, and macroeconomic indicators are doing good, right? GDP growing at more than the expected rates. GDP is growing at 8.2%. Your fiscal deficit coming down to 5.6%. So why fiscal deficit came down? Mainly due to increase in the tax income, tax collections, and reduction in the overall expenditure of the government. So as you all know, fiscal deficit is nothing but the difference between government's overall expenditure and the revenue. So the revenue, that is the income, tax income especially, increased due to better tax collections, GST and all that, and the overall government expenditure has come down. So that's why fiscal deficit reduced. So here you can see this graph again, which is very important. You may get a question that fiscal deficit in the recent years are constantly decreasing or continuously increasing. You may get a statement. If at all, if you get a statement that in the last 5 years, if fiscal deficit is continuously decreasing, yes, it is continuously decreasing. You can see that 6.7%, then 6.4, 6.4, 5.9 in 23-24. 5.9 was projected, estimated before, but now the actual data has been released. During the budget time, it was estimated to be 5.9, but now the actual data is 5.6. So we can say that fiscal deficit is continuously in the declining trend, which is a good sign for Indian economy. So you can see the other important fiscal indicators. We have revenue deficit, we have primary deficit, effective revenue deficit. So you should be clear about all these important concepts in your static area. So primary deficit is basically your fiscal deficit minus interest payments, and then revenue deficit is nothing but revenue receipts minus revenue expenditure. So effective revenue deficit is revenue deficit minus capital investments by the state governments. If you see, the center gives funds for the state governments, which is considered as revenue expenditure of the center, right? But out of that expenditure, out of that funds which is given to the center states, the states use certain amount for capital investments. So we need to remove that. Once you remove that, you will get the effective revenue deficit. So be clear with these concepts. So whenever you read current affairs, always make sure that you revise these basic concepts, the fundamental basic concepts, especially when it comes to subjects like economy and polity also. So that's about fiscal deficit. So today we discussed about three important aspects: GDP. Financial year 24, India's GDP grown at a rate of 8.2% from the previous year 7%. Then core sector, what are the core sectors? 8 core industries we talked about. Then what is index of industrial production, that is important. Then coming to fiscal deficit has been reduced to 5.6% of GDP, majorly due to increase in tax income and reduction in expenditure. So the actual numbers, what is the actual numbers in terms of percentage of GDP? It is 5.6. What is the actual value of fiscal deficit? It is 16.5 lakh crore. Right, it is around 16.5 lakh crore. So for us, most important is the percentage of GDP. So the next topic, next few topics are related to international relations. So here, Germany, US, and the German president, they've given a green signal for Ukraine to use their weapons, whatever Germany has supplied to them, to use it against Russia. So if you see, US president also in the past is also authorized Ukraine to use the weapons, especially some long range missiles and all that, to especially what is happening in the Russia-Ukraine war. If you see, Russia is more on the offensive, especially to the Kharkiv region. So we'll discuss about what is Kharkiv region and how Ukraine is struggling to defend the Kharkiv region. So this NATO allies, they are supplying these arms. They already supplied the arms. Now they have authorized Ukraine to go ahead to use their weapons against Russia. So again, what we see is Russia-Ukraine war, which is going on for the past 2 years. Again, there is no signs of uh, you know peace and all that. The war is more and more um, increasing. That's what we see. So here, what is the takeaway for us? What we have to focus? We have to focus more about NATO, right? Because Germany, US, though Ukraine is not part of NATO, but NATO is supporting Ukraine. So we should have a fair idea about NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was founded in 1949 during the Cold War era. Right, as you know that US on one side and USSR, there was power block politics, communism versus capitalism, and all that. So that time, many countries, especially that time, if you see many European countries, they were worried about Soviet Union's expansionism. Today, what you see, the expansionism, when we use this word today, it applies to China, right? So in the same way, those days, they were worried about Soviet Union expansionism. So for that, US guaranteed them military assistance and protection under this alliance, which is North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and which was established in 1949. It was founded with 12 members, but today what we see is NATO kept expanding, and today NATO has 32 members. And you are not expected to know all the members; they are not going to ask, but at least you should know who are all the what are the significant countries that are part of NATO, or what are the countries which recently joined. Recently, if you see Finland joined NATO, so you should know those countries which are recently added to this alliance. Right. So then we should discuss about Kharkiv region, because Kharkiv region, which is here in the map, you can see, which is in the northeastern part of Ukraine. So Russia-Ukraine war, which is going on for the past 2 years. If you see in 2022, Russia tried to take control of Kharkiv region, but Ukraine was able to defend. But now, again, Russia is more aggressive on taking back Kharkiv. But again, Ukraine is struggling there because of ammunition and manpower shortages, especially the ammunition shortages. That's where the US and Germany, the NATO allies, they are supplying the ammunition, they are supplying their weapons, and now they've authorized Ukraine to use this weapon against Russia. And this Russia-Ukraine war, what are the consequences? What we see is there is widespread displacement, right? A lot of people moving out of Ukraine. There's a lot of displacement, and not only that, this war has disrupted the global economy. How? Because the global supply chains, especially the food grains and all that got the supply of food grains and all that got disrupted due to this war, and that led to increase in food inflation and all that. So so that's why this is important. So Kharkiv region is very much in the news in the recent times. So there can be a question related to places in news, especially in the last few years. UPSC is asking questions like places in news, country which it belongs to, right? So you have to match it. So in that way, Kharkiv is very important. That can be a potential question. So Kharkiv is a city that lies in the northeastern Ukraine, right? And another important fact here is Ukraine is the second largest country in the continent in Europe after Russia. If you see, Ukraine is the second largest country. So that is about Kharkiv region. So now coming to Israel's attack on Gaza Strip, especially the Rafah crossing. So that is the news item here that we will discuss. So if you see the Gaza Strip, this attack on Gaza Strip that started way back in October last year, October after October 7 attacks, the Hamas attack on Israel, where Hamas killed around 1,200 Israeli people and taken hostages of around 250 Israeli people. So from then onwards, Israel started attacking Hamas, and Israel has hoped that to destroy Hamas. Israel says that that is the only objective, and in fact, Israel says that it wants to take back the hostages. That is one important objective for Israel. Another aspect is they want to destroy Hamas completely. Though there is a lot of international pressure on Israel to go for a ceasefire to stop this war, where Israel this invasion or this occupation or this war has taken around 36,000 Palestinian lives, which is horrible, and there is a lot of international pressure on Israel. But still, Israel is persisting because of various reasons, and Benjamin Netanyahu, because of a lot of political pressure, is continuing this war. Otherwise, he might lose his prime minister post and all that. So there are many other aspects related to that. So here our focus will be on Rafah, the Rafah crossing, very much in the news. And if you see, Israel started attacking the northern parts of, here you can see in the map, initially it started attacking the northern parts of Gaza city, then the central parts. So when Israel started attacking this from the northern parts and the central part, the civilians, they moved gradually to the Rafah crossing, which is the southern part of Gaza Strip. So there are million plus Palestinians who has taken shelter in this southern part of Gaza Strip, which is called as the Rafah region or the Rafah crossing, right? So now Israel is attacking this Rafah region also. So starting from this May, there was a lot of international pressure not to go for it, but Israel is saying that a lot of Hamas terrorists are taking refuge, hiding there in the Rafah camps, and they want to completely destroy. And many countries are trying to go for a ceasefire, uh, go for a ceasefire agreement between the Hamas and Israel. Countries like Qatar, even the US is putting pressure for a ceasefire and all that, but these things are not happening. So what about Hamas demand? Hamas is saying that they are ready for swapping the hostages for prisoners who had been taken by Israel, but they have two important conditions. They say that first of all there should be a complete ceasefire, and then there should be a complete withdrawal of Israel from Gaza Strip, which Israel is not agreeing for that. So that's why this keep going on, because Israel says that its ultimate motive is to completely destroy Hamas, and before that they want to take back the hostages safely. So that's why we see that this crisis, this war um, keeps going on, and there are many civilians lives lost here. So Rafah crossing is very important, very much in the news in the recent times. So here you can see the southernmost exit point of the Gaza Strip, that is called as the Rafah crossing, which shares a border with Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Right, that is very important. And Rafah crossing is the only exit that does not lead to Israeli territory. You can see from the map. Wherever all other places, the Palestinians from Gaza Strip, if they want to come out, they have to step into the Israeli territory, except the Rafah crossing, where they can enter into Egyptian territory, the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula. So Rafah crossing. So two places in news today, very important in international relations: the Kharkiv region in Ukraine and Rafah crossing in Gaza Strip. Right. So the last topic for discussion today, that is elections in South Africa. So again, this is an important topic. Why it is important for us? You might have a question. Once we discuss, you will come to know that why it is important, right? So there is a coalition rule expected, coalition government expected in South Africa for the first time since 1994. That's why this election is very important. You all know that there was the system of apartheid in South Africa since 1994. The white colonizers, they discriminated the black majority in Africa, the apartheid system. And 1994, when South Africa became a democracy, and since then, what we see, African National Congress, headed by Nelson Mandela, ruled South Africa with a comfortable majority. In fact, in their first elections, they got around more than 70% of the votes, because the African National Congress, headed by Nelson Mandela, played a crucial role in eliminating the apartheid system. So, so what we see now is that the African National Congress, which is a very important political party in South Africa since the last 30 years, which ruled the country consecutively for the last 30 years, in these elections, now it is expected not to get a majority. There is a lot of possibility that there will be a coalition government. That's why it is important, right? And the final results have not yet come, which are expected by tomorrow. If you see, there are intermediate results, but based on that, the African National Congress is just getting only around 40% as of now. If you see the previous election, 2019 election, the same African National Congress got around 58%. So the uh, President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, for him to be re-elected, but most likely ANC will be the majority party. I mean, the party with most number of representatives, but still they'll not be able to form a majority government, right? So that is the point here. So what is the significance? Why we are talking about elections in South Africa? If you see, the significance is that if you take the African continent, South Africa is the most developed economy in Africa. So that's why the most developed economy in Africa. So that's why it is important. And we talked about this apartheid system and all that. So we should have some basic understanding about what is apartheid. So it was a system of racial discrimination which was unique only to South Africa. So the white European colonizers, they imposed this system on the majority black population in South Africa. The population of blacks in South Africa, you see, that is more than 80%. But during this apartheid system before 1994, there was racial discrimination based on skin color. There were no voting rights for the non-whites. There was segregation of whites and non-whites. The blacks, they cannot enter the uh, white region, and they cannot work there, or they cannot live along with the whites. And public places like hotels, trains, buses, and all these where there is a lot of discrimination. The blacks, they cannot travel along with the whites. They should have their separate facilities and all that. So that is called segregation. And there was complete ban on formation of association by the blacks, or protest by the blacks. So this is basically the system of apartheid, which was overthrown by the South Africans, especially the crucial role played by African National Congress in 1994, which was headed by Nelson Mandela. And today what we see is 30 years African National Congress ruled consecutively South Africa, and today what we see is they are struggling to get a majority. So why? Because South Africa is grappling with a lot of socio-economic problems, the major problems like poverty, unemployment, especially unemployment. Their unemployment rate is 32%, which is one of the highest in the world. So, and these problems of poverty and unemployment significantly affecting the black majority, and this black majority supported this African National Congress for the past 30 years. So now they are not that much supporting. That's why ANC is struggling to get majority. So if you see the electoral system of South Africa, we should have some idea, because they have a different electoral system, not like in India. In India, we have the first past the post system, where we vote for the individual candidates, not for the party. But in South Africa, they don't vote for the individual candidate, they vote for the party, not the candidate. Right? For example, they vote for ANC or other parties in the Democratic Alliance, they vote only for the party and not for individual candidates. So they have this system of proportional representative system, where the parties will get the vote share, and based on their vote share they will get representatives, and any party that gets more than 50% vote share, they'll be able to form the government. So that is the proportional representation system. So this time in this year elections, ANC is not expected to get more than 50% votes in South Africa due to the reasons we discussed. So that's why um, it is very important. So why we need to know this much in detail, why I'm talking about this much detail about South Africa elections? Because South Africa is a member of BRICS, and every year if you see, we get at least 2 to 3 questions. If you see the previous year questions, prelims, 2 to 3 questions related to Africa they keep asking. And last year African Union has been added to the G20, part of G20. So, and India played a leadership role in getting African Union as part of G20. So that's why definitely in the upcoming few years also we can expect questions related to Africa. So you should have this basic knowledge about South Africa, what is happening there. So that is about elections in South Africa. So we'll move on to the next topics. So this is about the important topics today, and what are the takeaways for prelims. And we have other topics. These are the editorials. Out of all the editorials, I felt these three are important. You can go through this. I'm not going to discuss these editorials because most of these are important in mains perspective. My primary focus will be on prelims perspective. Yes, gradually I'll be giving some important points in mains perspective whenever required, but the primary focus will be on the prelims takeaway of the Hindu. So this you can read. Don't spend too much time spending in reading these editorials. Just give a read, and any few points, 1 or 2 data points or some analytical points, if you see that will be helpful to you, just make a note of it. Otherwise you leave it. If you are regularly reading this, that will be good. And another important aspect about editorials is that reading editorial will help you not only in GS, but it will help you for your CSAT also, reading comprehension. So what I have seen is that no reading comprehension in CSAT is tougher than a Hindu editorial, right? So every day you read 2-3 articles, editorials, that helps build your comprehension skills, and that will help you much in CSAT also. Otherwise, don't spend too much time in making notes, or if you're not understanding something in this, sometimes what we see is there will be a lot of technical articles written, which will be written for the lawyers or which will be written for the doctors, not for us. So don't break your head here. Just give a read and move away. So what is more important is what we can take about the prelims aspects. So with this, I conclude today's discussion. So we'll try to have every day. By end of the day, I'll be posting these analysis videos. I hope this was useful to you. And thanks for watching, and subscribe our channel so that you will get this daily news analysis video by the end of the day. And wherever I mention, you can take notes only of those points, not everything in this. And whatever you feel useful, these data points and other points, that you can make a note of it. So otherwise, keep your notes very simple and handy, because you have 365 more days for the next prelims, that is prelims 2025. So you should not be overburdened with too much of materials. So be limited with your notes if you're taking. And I have, based on my experience, I started reading newspaper, in my very first attempt in 2009, and it's been 15 years I'm reading newspaper. Based on my experience, I have, segregated these topics, which will be definitely important for us, and the rest of the topics, if you just read the headlines, that is sufficient. Or if you want just one paragraph, you read and move. Wherever you're confused, that is enough. Right, because sometimes students say that what to read and what to leave. So anyways, I'm making a video every day morning. You will be getting a video on what are the important topics to read, but you yourself read it once before watching this, so that you will get more perspectives, so what to take from it. So I hope this was useful, and will definitely try to come out this video by end of the day every day. And thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel. See you tomorrow.